The New York Jets secured a home 27-24 victory over Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons, while some fans continue to root for the Jets to bottom out and get as high of a draft pick as possible, folks. These late season wins still matter for Gang Green and the infrastructure and future that they want to build in the Big Apple. We'll talk about why coming up right here on NY Flight Jets Talk.
This is NY Flight Jets Talk with Connor Long. NY Flight Jets Talk. We're talking Jets, 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 Jets. NY Flight Jets Talk with special guests. NY Flight Jets Talk. Here's your host, Connor Long. Jets, 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 Jets.
What is going on, New York Jet fans? Hello, everyone. Welcome back here into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk as we come to you guys live right here on this Monday evening, December 1st. We've made it. I mean, I can't even believe it's already 2026. This year flew, and part of it is because the Jets, for better or worse, have given us headlines. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Connor Long right here with you guys on NY Flight Jets Talk. Questions, comments, thoughts, throw all of those in the chat. We're going to get to those again. We appreciate the hell out of you. We appreciate you joining us right here on this Monday evening. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. That is completely free, and it helps us grow significantly right here on the channel. Shout out to you, John, for hopping in, gifting a channel membership already, my friend. Thank you for the support as always right here on the program. And joining me right now, my esteemed colleague over at JetsXFactor.com, the great Nania, gracing us with his presence right here on the show. Nania, it is great to be back with you, my friend. Last time we were on, we were previewing the Tyrod Taylor era and what that may hold. Now, the Jets are 1-1 in the Taylor era. But I think, where we can start off is we can agree that there has been a noticeable improvement, not only in the offensive statistics when Taylor has been under center, but also just the eye test and how much smoother that this Jets offense has been moving. So first off, thank you so much for joining us again, Nania. It's great to be with you. And look, the late season wins to the tank crowd. It's disappointing, but to people like us who enjoy covering this team and rooting for this team every Sunday, it's certainly intriguing, and these wins are not meaningless. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions in Jetland.
Yeah, great to be back as always. It's always a blast to come on with you, Connor, but especially after a win, which is something that it doesn't happen much in general, let alone when on times when I've come onto your show. I feel like that's pretty rare. But yeah, I think everyone can enjoy some more positive energy out of a win, regardless of whether or not that win is relevant to a playoff push. Mm-hmm. But especially for people like you and myself who are writing about them every single day, like when they lose a game or a losing streak drags on, it kind of, not that it affects my life, I don't want to say, but when you're writing about it every day, it does kind of, every day I'm writing about negative things. Yeah, there's redundancy in a very negative way. You're mostly focusing on how can they be better, what are they doing wrong, what are the things they don't have. But when you win a game, the whole narrative flips. It's, here's the things they did right, here are the things they can build upon, and that, it's just more infectious positive energy that is enjoyable. So it's always a good thing. And yeah, I think, look, in terms of the tank versus win thing, where the Jets find themselves right now, I'm someone who understands the appeal of tanking, and I think there are still situations where it is the most beneficial thing for a franchise, but I don't think that's where the Jets are right now. And I think the biggest thing, and I compare it to 2020, I think that's the best way to look at it, because I was pro tank that year, and I do think that in that particular year, it was something that the Jets would benefit from. The difference is that team, you knew that the head coach and that the quarterback and most of the players in that team were not a part of their future. So it did not really matter if they lost games. And if they won games, there was nothing to really be gained from that, because Frank Gore wasn't giving them any momentum in the 2021 season. He didn't need to learn how to win games. Neither did Brashad Perriman or whoever, Pierre Desir, whoever else they had on that atrocious team.
Les Austin.
Exactly. So it didn't really matter if that team won games. But this is a much different situation. This head coach is going to be here for probably at least 3 years, given the trade deadline. This is a first-year general manager with a lot of his pieces on the team, which is another important part of this, especially after the trade deadline. A lot of Darren Muji pieces are on the field right now, so that's a reflection on him. And a lot of these young players either will be a part of the future or have a chance to be. So that's why the wins have values, because it is it's an indicator of what we're going to see in the future. So if they lose games and rise up the draft board, it's a reflection on this regime, this team, and what we're going to get in the future. If they get the number one pick, whatever high pick they get from losing, do you trust these guys to make the most out of that pick if they can't win games and show you something to feel confident about? So the more they win, the more faith it builds in what the Jets are establishing as their foundation moving forward. So that's why I think the wins do carry legitimate value regarding the long-term future.
Also, for me, I entirely agree with you. And, the main point there that I want to get into, of which was you saying how you understand the appeal for tanking. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think there was a stark difference in rooting for a tank starting in week 11, like some fans were this season, starting in week 12, compared to, you getting to week 17, week 18. You're kind of in that toilet bowl with 3 other very, very, very poor football teams, and you maybe want to throw those games. Sure, like I understand if you root for a loss in week 17 or week 18, and I still understand fans who, are taking the tank route already right now. And I agree, this head coach is going to be back. There are pieces on this team who will be here next season, a very significant amount, especially when you look at the rise of a player like Adonai Mitchell. You highlighted in a column earlier today, a player who is under contract for the next 2 seasons after this as well on a rookie deal. John Mechie, who had 3 very rough drops yesterday, but overall has been a net positive since he was brought in the Michael Carter II trade. He might be back on an RFA tender this offseason. Jawan Briggs, another guy. The list goes on and on. And for the young players, I'm going to pull up this tweet that I put out last night talking about how, players, the young guys in particular, like Breece Hall, like Jermaine Johnson, a lot of these guys, they need to learn how to win. This team is going into a full rebuild, and the roster, like I mentioned, is loaded with a ton of young players who, sure, they had success in college, but the NFL is an entire different animal, and these guys need to know what it feels like to win football games at the professional level. Learning how to win matters just as much as you having the number 3 overall pick, in my opinion. And, I wrote a whole article about it, Nania, but we'll get into the fact of, just because you have the number 1 overall pick, that doesn't guarantee that, okay, Fernando Mendoza comes in and he's leading you to the AFC Championship, in year 1, like Jaden Daniels did with the Washington Commanders. That's just not how it works. There's a lot more that goes into landing your guy than, okay, I have my first opportunity. We have the number 1 overall pick. We're going to take this guy. Okay, boom. He comes in, no development, no coaching whatsoever, and you're in the playoffs year 1. Also, might I add, there are going to be teams picking in front of the Jets that do not need a quarterback. The Titans, who I think are pretty much a lock to be the number 1 overall pick. I think there's a world, Nania, where they don't win another game this season. I think that's the reality in Tennessee. They're not going to take a quarterback. The Giants are going to be picking most likely in the top 3 or 4. They're not taking quarterback. That's 2 teams at the top who aren't taking a quarterback. And the Jets are sitting at number 7 overall right now, which you outlined in your rooting guide earlier on Sunday morning. That was pretty much the worst case scenario. The Jets could have ended up as high as the number 1 overall pick on Sunday or as low as number 7. They get the bad bounce there for the tank crowd. They currently sit at number 7, but with 5 games left in the season still? 5 games is a ton of time, folks. So much can change over 5 games. So the Jets could, by the end of the year, be picking 10th overall, or they could be picking 2nd overall. So much can change over these games, Nania, and I think that's what a lot of fans need to realize.
Yeah, and I think, to go back to the point we both made earlier, I think it's important to realize that we need to develop reasons to trust the people that are going to make these picks, regardless of where they land in the draft. And that's the thing about the NFL. There are so few games to where every single game is a very valuable opportunity to learn more about what every person on the field, whether it's a player, a coach, anybody. You don't get, it's not like baseball, basketball, where there's so many games, and at a certain point you understand, okay, this is who this guy is. There's not really much surprise here. We can project what they're going to be like, what their value is. In the NFL, it's such a small sample. That's why every game is so important to
precious.
learn about what we're seeing here. We don't know that much about Aaron Glenn. We didn't through 7 games, and it looked really bad. That's why he needed a turnaround like this, because through 7 games there was nothing to go off of to say here's why he's going to be good, besides just being optimistic about it. And I say that as someone who wanted him hired and really liked him. There just wasn't any tangible evidence of it on the field close to that halfway point. And that's why this was an important stretch that they have going, and it would be valuable if they sustain it down the stretch here, because now we're starting to see evidence week by week. Here is something you could actually point to that says Aaron Glenn could be a good head coach. He can be trusted to use the whatever pick they get, all the assets that they have to make those picks count and build something sustainable. And, when they were 0-6, 0-7, and we started drawing those comparisons to Dan Campbell, Kyle Shanahan, all these other coaches who started poorly and turned it around, we were hoping that they would do something like this, because, them going 0-17, 1-16, whatever it may be, to get the top pick of a quarterback wasn't going to have much appeal if Aaron Glenn kept coaching the way he was coaching. The team kept playing the way it was playing under him. But the fact that they've gone 3-2 in the last 5 here, and that's with those 2 losses being decently competitive games on the road as massive underdogs. They've done, not only have they done that since the 0-7 start, but that's post Quinnen and Sauce trades, with Sauce not even playing against the Bengals. That's with Garrett Wilson out for basically all of these games. So they're playing better with less talent than they did to start the season. That is a strong indicator that Glenn is starting to figure it out, that the culture is starting to take hold. And these are things that do have legitimate value moving forward. So I do get it. I think there are a lot of situations where tanking is positive, meaningless wins late in the season don't really do a lot for your future, but I don't think this is one of those instances. I think there is, each win is something that can improve their future.
Yeah, and I think 2 of the biggest areas where Aaron Glenn has ultimately improved is, number 1, managing the clock. We haven't seen as, many fiascos as it pertains to clock management, and also the decisions to go for it or not on 4th down as well. Those are the 2 main areas where I've seen a lot of improvements, and it draws a lot of parallels to Dan Campbell and how he got off to such a slow start that first year in Detroit, and then came out of the bye week really, really improved each and every single week. Players wanted to play for him, and at the end of the day, fans were bought back in to Dan Campbell and were excited for what his future held entering year 2, despite finishing with, I think they went 3-13-1 that season. That was obviously the first year of a multi-year turnaround in Detroit. So I think watching Glenn improve in, areas such as game management, the clock decisions, the 4th down or kick, the 4th down or punt decisions certainly have been promising. And overall, look, there haven't been that many positives at 3-9, except the special teams unit. You've been following this now, Nania, for a few weeks in a row, talking about what it would take for the Jets to have the greatest special teams unit this season in NFL history. Now, according to the DVOA metric, as you pointed out in the tweet earlier today, the Jets are on pace to finish 3rd all time, as the record currently belongs to the 2002 Saints, who I think was Mike Westhoff. You'll know better than me here. Was Mike Westhoff?
It was not Mike Westhoff. No,
it was
not.
Mike
but I pointed this out in an article last week. It actually was. It was Al Everest was their special teams coach, and there's a tree that trickles down to Aaron Glenn and Chris Banjo between 2 of his proteges. So it was interesting how they do kind of trace directly back to that team, partially through Westhoff as well, who did spend time with the Saints, where he connected with both of these guys on the Jets.
Okay, interesting. So my question to you is, you've been watching this special teams unit, you've been analyzing special teams tape on this unit all season long. Austin McNamara, of course, has just been incredible. Aaron Glenn, we heard it from him post game yesterday. He's a weapon for this team. Having a punter who could flip the field is so important in the modern day NFL, and then having a kicker who can consistently hit from beyond 50 and pretty much be automatic. He missed that one kick from 55 yesterday in the third quarter. But other than that, he hasn't missed a kick all year, 23 of 24, second highest field goal percentage in the league, trailing only former Jet, current Carolina Panther, Eddie Pinheiro, who's been perfect on every field goal attempt this season. I'll pose the question to you. Will the Jets finish the season with the best special teams unit of all time?
I'm going to say no because it's really hard, but they're going to be up there, and they are right now. But it's just what I think is really impressive is the fact that it comprises every facet of special teams. You know, you could have a great year where it's like your kicker gets hot, or you just break loose for 2 kick returns, and that could be enough to push you up some of these leaderboards and special teams metrics. But every facet, the Jets have been phenomenal this year. Kick and punt return, covering both of those. Folk has been great. McNamara, they block up the returns. You know, both returners have been great between Nwangwu, and Isaiah Williams has now elevated himself to being a really strong returner. They've been excellent, but the blocking too deserves a lot of credit. It's not like every time they make a return, it's just all them breaking every single tackle. There have been a lot of great lanes, and that is a credit to all those guys blocking on those units. So just the fact that every facet of the special teams has been pristine. You know, you go back to those 2 fumbles early in the season between Gibson and Isaiah Williams, and that's really it in terms of special teams mistakes this year. Outside of that, it's been they've won 2 of the 3 games that the Jets have. They don't win either of those games without it. And I'm sure Bengals is something I'm forgetting in there too that was essential. But yeah, they've been phenomenal, and they have a real chance to, at least based on DVOA, go down as the best special teams that we've ever seen in the NFL.
Yeah, and you know, something that I find really interesting is this could directly correlate to how great of a coach maybe Chris Banjo is, because it goes beyond this. I remember when the Jets first hired Chris Banjo, you wrote an article for us about the turnaround in Denver and the role that he played in it.
Yeah.
Once he got to Denver as the assistant special teams coordinator. And like, I read this at first, and for full transparency, I kind of thought, maybe it's a coincidence. Mike Westhoff, one of the greatest minds there. And then now when you're seeing what he's been able to do with the Jets, and it's not only McNamara and Folk, of course, but like the way he's been able to utilize these gunners and get guys different reps. Like, I don't think we saw Kane Nwangu at gunner last season under Brent Boyer. He's been one of the team's best gunners this season. So at the end of the day, look, Chris Banjo could be a really, really, really damn good mind and a really good special teams coach. And that's a testament to Aaron Glenn going out on the market, finding a guy like this, bring them in. I also think it helps. I think this is an area where it's overblown when it comes to young coaches. Chris Banjo retired from the NFL in February of 2023. He played in the NFL just 3 seasons ago. In 2022, he was in the NFL. So I think that's super, super important, having a coach who played the game recently. That's why my mock off season, my first one for us at JetX, I had the Jets firing their quarterback coach, Charles London, and the guy I had them targeting was David Blau. He's developed he's helped develop a quarterback in Jaden Daniels with Washington. All that to say that I just think having a coach who has played in the modern day NFL is a very valuable asset that I think is overlooked. I see a comment. We're going to get in the chat, so we appreciate that. Smash the like button, hit subscribe. Michael Nania, Connor Long right here with you guys on NY Flight Jets. I want to jump to this comment, then we'll make our way through. From Slow Runner, who says, wouldn't surprise me if Chris Banjo gets interviews as the head coach. That's a really interesting comment, right? I was thinking about this last night before I went to sleep. I was like, is it possible that Chris Banjo will get an interview for head coach? Definitely not this year. I think he has to be in the role for at least one more year. But if they are on this pace at this time next season, it's hard to believe that a team won't even entertain talking to him. The Jets interviewed Mike Loxley from Maryland, who was like who's had an absolutely crazy record, was over 30 games below 500. They interviewed him. You'd have to think a team would consider talking to what would probably be the best special teams coordinator in the league by then.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen special teams coordinators get interviews. I know the Jets interviewed Darren Rizzi this year. He was the Saints special teams coordinator, I believe. So it's happened. And, John Harbaugh is a good example. Bill Belichick, although he upgraded to defense before he was up to being a head coach. So there's some precedent for it. But yeah, to go back to your point about Banjo and the way he's coached this year, I think it also reflects. It's a positive reflection on Glenn, as we look for things to be optimistic about with him. The fact that he made that hire is impressive. And also, I think Glenn deserves some credit for it as well, because we've seen a lot of special teams valuation with the way that the roster has been managed. If you think back to a lot of the roster moves they made, I'm talking like late summer, who made the 53 waiver pickups and things like that. It was special teams was critical in a lot of those choices that they made, who made the roster, who didn't. So they've really shown that valuation, and it's translated to the field. And, he would coach alongside Westhoff with the Saints. He in Detroit, the Lions had a great special teams with their coordinator, Dave Phipp, who is a protege of Al Everest, who coached that Saints special teams unit that has the record the Jets are trying to break. So there's a lineage that goes back here for this Jets team, back to the legendary 2002 Saints special teams, which is funny. I was looking at that team. They actually weren't a good team. I think they won like 6-7 games. So that's kind of.
I see you throwing that in there. I see you throwing that in there.
No, it wasn't a slight. I just think it's interesting how sometimes like you have amazing special teams and it's like, oh, no one remember. Oh, they were 9-7, so I'll give them some credit. They didn't make the playoffs. Oh, Mike McCarthy was their offensive coordinator. I just pulled up the Pro Football Reference page, so I'm just doing what I do when I do that, which is like, oh wow, look at this, and I go down a rabbit hole.
It's anyway, surprising.
Yeah. So I like the special teams valuation from Aaron Glenn on down, and hopefully they can sustain it year to year. I don't think they'll be this good every year. That's just kind of impossible. But if it could be a positive every year, I think that's sustainable, because going back to Detroit, every year Glenn was there with the same coordinator, Dave Phipp. They were a positive every year in special teams. So you can do that. That is achievable. And if it is, then it would be big, because I do think, like, are they wasting this? Because how good would they have been? 2015 was the year where their special teams was really bad. I know you were young back then, but the Jets lost multiple close games that year where they gave up punt return touchdowns, where they had to pick up Steve Weatherford one week when he was older because their punter was injured and he had a bunch of shanks, and they lost to the Patriots in a close game. So, like, what if they had this special teams back then? Why couldn't they have had this unit when it actually would have made a difference and pushed them into a playoff spot or a division title? That's frustrating, but at the same time, it is what it is. I'll appreciate them for what they're doing, and hopefully these coaches can sustain this in the future or something remotely close to it.
Well said. Billy says, I have confidence in them with every pick except the one for quarterback. We have a terrifying history of QB picks, and I completely understand this. The Jets haven't been able to land a quarterback since Joe Namath, which was well before our time, probably before our parents' time as well. That's how long ago it was. At the end of the day, I completely understand this. But, if anything gives you promise, I know it doesn't involve the quarterback position. You could make a case for how bad Glenn's evaluation has been of the quarterback position. But look at the trades that Darren Mugia has made. Look at the value he's been able to find in the trade market. Glenn is beginning to, each week, I've continued to gain more confidence in him as a coach because he's just improving. But Darren Mugia, I've never really batted an eye with him. I think the value that he's been able to get on the trade market for these guys and his overall talent evaluation, I think has been pretty solid. So that's the only thing that'll give you a little confidence. But I understand not wanting to, just put your blind faith into this regime to, all right, we're just going to land a quarterback, fully develop him with a first-time offensive coordinator, with a first-time defensive-minded head coach, and a GM who's never been in the job before.
Yeah, and there really isn't anything they can do to inspire faith in it, both between the Jets' history just as a franchise, which, obviously Aaron Glenn, Darren Mugia weren't there, but we've said that time and time again for regime after regime, and it never matters. So that thing is going to persist until they buck the trend. And then, in terms of evaluating like we could judge them for Justin Fields, and I think it was poorly handled, all of that, but it's a completely different thing from drafting a quarterback and developing him high in the draft. So there's really nothing they could do to increase or decrease their stock in that department until they actually have to do it. So yeah, we just have to wait and see who they pick, how they handle it. But at the very least, I think you could feel that they are going to bring this guy into a better situation than I think Zach Wilson was in, Sam Darnold was in, probably the best since Sanchez. And that was probably better than what this next guy will be coming into, because that offensive line was just amazing. But yeah, they have young offensive line talent. We're seeing young receiver talent develop around Garrett Wilson. You have Mason Taylor. So there's a lot to be confident in with the offensive pieces. And I think Engstrand is showing a lot of promise, even if the offensive stats and production aren't there. I think scheme wise, he's done a really nice job. So that's the best thing you could invest faith in, is the supporting cast that they're going to put this rookie quarterback into. But in terms of picking the right guy, developing him properly, there's really nothing they could do to inspire faith. And it is justified to be skeptical of how they're going to handle that until they prove otherwise.
I see everyone in the chat. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the support. We're just going to take a couple more, though, before we wrap. Don't worry. I see everyone. We appreciate the support. Slow Runner says, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets sign Mariota or trade for Murray as their bridge QB while taking a top safety and or edge with their first two picks. Then says Caleb Downs at safety, Ruben Baines at defensive end would be a huge upgrade for the Jets defense. To the first comment, I do not want anything to do with Kyler Murray. You broke down the cap, which was super was super easy for me to look at, because if you look at his contract, he has all these different bonuses and roster things added into his deal. It's so complicated. The way you summed it up is it would pretty much be a 1 year, $39 million tryout. And that is not something I want to do, especially after the Justin Fields experiment failed. I think this regime has to bring their own guy in, develop them, and that's their guy. Trading for Kyler Murray, I don't think is a viable solution. And I could see Mariota. I had it happening in my mock off season. They need some sort of veteran. I frankly think there's a universe where Tyrod Taylor could retire this offseason. I think that's a possibility that not a lot of people are talking about, especially if he starts the remaining 5 games of the year. There's going to be some wear and tear on him, and I don't know if he's going to want to go through another training camp at 37 years old and back up and potentially start some games with the Jets alongside a rookie. So Mariota's possibility. He's been somewhat efficient as a backup. Again, not a high-end starter, not even an average starter. Kind of that tier of the Tyrod Taylor, a low-end starter, a high-end backup. I could see that, but I just can't get behind Caleb Downs at safety. Maybe Ruben Bain. I don't want to pass up on a quarterback for Ruben Bain. He's special. He kind of puts up like Shamar Stewart numbers, though Nania has like 3 sacks this year, but like 56 pressures, I think it is, at Miami. I understand the thought process, and look, that patches a lot of holes on defense. I just don't see the Jets going in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think something like this is definitely on the table, especially as they win games and fall down the board. If they don't like one of these prospects, I think it's very much in play for them to punt the franchise quarterback once again, whether that's, low price stopgap like Mariota, or I guess you can't rule out the Murray thing, but I just don't think financially it's realistic, because, they theoretically could do it because they have so much cap space. And like you said, it would basically be a 1 year tryout in, forget what it was, high 30 million,
$39 million. Yeah.
Almost $40 million. So like technically they could do it, but the fact that they're already going to be paying $57 million next year to Rodgers and Justin Fields, you throw Kyler Murray into that's $100 million to 3 quarterbacks who none of them are going to be on your roster the next year, unless Kyler Murray magically gets back to his college form. So I just don't think that's good business that the Jets are interested in. So I think I think that like stopgap, low price stopgap, more so than the Justin Fields thing they did this year, a little higher price for a little more upside. I think that's something that's on the table, but I really, not that they should force a quarterback pick. If you don't like the guy, don't waste a pick. I get it, but like they're ready for a franchise quarterback. I really think they are.
Yeah.
They have the offensive line talent. They have a receiver one, a tight end one. They have a young coordinator who's going to have a year of experience at this point. He won't be a rookie like Mike LaFleur was when Zach Wilson came in. So I think they're ready. I don't think it's a situation where, the roster is so bad you need another year to build it for the rookie quarterback. The defensive roster is, but that is irrelevant for the quarterback's development. So I really think best case scenario, they get the quarterback this year and they have the picks to trade up if they need to go get their guy. I think that timeline wise, this is the year he should be coming in. But if they just don't like him or they can't, it doesn't play out that way, I understand. But I think ideally they get one this year.
Smash the like button, hit subscribe. Michael, Nania, Connor Long right here with you guys in Live Flight Jets Talk. Quick call, and then we will wrap. Let's go over to Lou B, who's been waiting. He joins us here on the show. Lou, what is going on? Do we got you?
Hey, yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear, man.
Okay, guys. The game was great. I mean, I was so happy that I was there. I always want to catch one, and that's why I go to all the games, because yesterday I caught one, right? I was at the right game at the right time. It was special. And at the end, that kick was really good. Let me tell you why. The rain was ice chunks at that moment. It was a much harder field than people just anticipated. It was the last 4 minutes of the game, and the rain started just coming down as like ice chunks. So it got more difficult, and I couldn't believe he got it. I was real happy. But my question for you guys today is, if Tennessee does have the first pick, do you think that we can use, other than picks, like a defensive package of guys that we're trying to that don't fit on our team, like maybe Sherwood or something like that, and maybe entice them like that? Because I think that obviously other people are going to be coming for a quarterback as well, other teams. But have you ever seen like a big package put together of players to try to move up instead of really using all these great picks that we don't want to give up as much? That's really all I had to say, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I just think that other teams are going to come up and try to get a quarterback, and, obviously we need one.
Thank you for the call, Lou. We'll answer that right here on the show. Appreciate your support as always. It's a very good question as well. I actually haven't heard that thought floated around. I feel like when you think of a trade up, it's like, okay, you get X amount of picks and we get one pick, and that's the pick that you're trading up for. It's certainly a very fair question. I want to hear your thoughts here. Overall, I just don't know, if Tennessee would want to take on, maybe like a bigger salary like Sherwood on the defensive side of the ball when they're not just a player away. They're not, a defensive hole away from winning even 7 games in a season. I think that's the biggest thing. It's the right idea for sure. I just view Tennessee as a team that is fully rebuilding, and they want as much draft capital to do that, unless, let's say, you put a Garrett Wilson in the trade, which is obviously not happening. But you put a star-studded player like that in the deal who could really, really boost up your rebuild. That's the only situation where I truly see it happening.
Yeah, and I was just looking back at the Panthers trade up with Chicago to kind of get a reference point on this, and they came up from number 9, so a little bit lower than where the Jets are right now, a couple of spots. And that was, like, as we all know, that was a massive haul for Chicago, and it seemed like it at the time. It only aged better and better as the Panthers obviously had a terrible season. The Bears got the number 1 pick out of it anyway.
Yeah.
And then they also got DJ Moore out of that, who was a high level offensive player. So I think it's a good idea. And maybe Will McDonald is a player you can consider with some trade value in there. I think he's a guy who might not be the greatest scheme fit. Had a great game this week, by the way, which I wrote about. I have been looking for more out of him, and he delivered it this week against Jake Matthews, one of the best left tackles. He had a really good game against him. But maybe not the best scheme fit, because they like bigger DNs who could play both phases. He hasn't had the greatest year in terms of consistency. We'll see how he finishes, but that's a chip you could use for that. Maybe I don't think Jermaine Johnson. I think they like his fit. And then beyond that, there just aren't a ton of pieces left for them to trade after parting with Sauce and Q. Given the packages that they received, I think they would have been good pieces to use in that type of trade. But I think it would have to be picks. And look, they have a great surplus of them at this point with 2 first rounders coming in. Colts first rounders getting higher and higher. We'll see. You have a best of pick in 27 with the Cowboys and Packers. That has a lot of value. That's an NBA type pick. You don't really see that a lot in the NFL. But you have that advantage. So I think their picks have a lot of value. And given how strong that their offensive infrastructure is kind of shaping up to be with the roster, especially if these receivers continue playing well, I think you have that comfort to say, okay, we can part with a couple of picks to go get this guy this year instead of punting another season if you really feel that strongly about someone. So, yeah.
Nania, thank you for the time as always, my friend. You got any final thoughts, football related, non-football related, before we wrap things up right here on the program?
Yeah, I mean, at this point with, number one pick well out of reach, not that I was rooting for losses, but I think I was not rooting for losses, but I also wasn't necessarily going like, let's win every single game, like being all out invested. But at this point, I think you can comfortably just like win some games, have some fun, build a foundation. I'm going to the game in Jacksonville in 2 weeks, so if the Jets can beat Miami this week, you have a 2-game winning streak, 4-2 out of the last 6 games. Got a chance to build a 3-game winning streak in Jacksonville, spoil their season. That would be a statement win. I think that would be pretty cool. So looking forward to seeing how they could close this season out here.
Hell yeah. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you tuning in. He's Michael Nania, my colleague over at Jets X Factor. I'm Connor Long right here on NY Flight Jets Talk saying have a great rest of your evening, everyone. And as always, JTS, baby. Jets, Jets, Jets. Peace out, folks.